A young girl, Sophia, is mysteriously kidnapped on her way to school, but manages to hide a crucial clue in her backpack. When a detective discovers it and follows the trail, what he finds in a secret basement leaves him stunned. The morning seemed like any other in the quiet suburb of Pinar del Rio. Birds were singing, neighbors were collecting their newspapers, and children like 12-year-old Sophia, known for her bright smile and love of books, were getting ready for school. "Sophia, honey, breakfast is ready," her mother called from the kitchen. Sophia bounded down the stairs, her backpack bouncing against her back. "Good morning, Mom," she chirped, taking a seat at the table. "What's for breakfast?" "Your favorite, pancakes with honey," her mother replied, placing a steaming plate in front of her. "Eat quickly, I don't want you to be late for school." As Sophia devoured her breakfast, her father entered the kitchen, adjusting his tie. "Good morning, family," he greeted, kissing his wife on the cheek and ruffling Sophia's hair. "Ready for your presentation today, sweetheart?" Sophia, her mouth full of pancakes, nodded enthusiastically. She swallowed hastily. "I've been practicing all week. I'm going to talk about Marie Curie." "I'm sure you'll do great," her father said, beaming proudly. "Remember, if you get nervous—" I know," Sophia interrupted, rolling her eyes affectionately. "Take a deep breath and count to 10. "That's my girl," her father laughed. "Well, I have to get going. Have a good day." "Don't move," Montero shouted. But the scene that greeted them inside was chilling. The warehouse was practically empty, except for a few boxes and old pieces of furniture. And in the center, where a van should have been, there were only tire tracks on the dusty floor. "Damn it," Montero muttered, frustration evident in his voice. "We were too late." "Chief," one of the officers called out. "I found something." Montero hurried over. The officer was holding a crumpled piece of paper. "Looks like a receipt," the officer said, handing it to Montero. The detective examined it carefully. It was a gas station receipt, dated just an hour ago. "Oasis Gas Station," Montero read aloud. "It's on the outskirts of town, off Highway 27. You think they're headed there, Chief?" another officer asked. Montero frowned, his mind racing. "It's possible, or at least they passed through there. It's our best lead for now." He turned to his team. "I want some of you to stay here and comb this place for more evidence. The rest of you, with me. We're going to that gas station." As they left the warehouse, Montero couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. They had been so close. "Don't give up, Sophia," he murmured to himself as he climbed into his car. "We'll find you." At the Oasis gas station, the atmosphere was peaceful. The attendant, a middle-aged man named Carlos, was yawning as he flipped through a magazine behind the counter. Suddenly, the door burst open, startling him. "Police!" Montero announced, flashing his badge. "We need to see your security footage from the last few hours." Carlos blinked, confused. "What? Why?" "Nothing unusual has happened here." "It's about a kidnapping," Montero explained quickly. "A little girl. We believe the kidnappers may have passed through here." Carlos's eyes widened. "Oh my God," he murmured. Of course, the cameras are this way." As Carlos led them towards the back office, Montero noticed how nervous the man seemed. "Is everything all right, sir?" he asked. Carlos hesitated, then said, "It's just, there was a white van here a few hours ago. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but—" Montero felt his pulse quicken. "What is it? Tell me everything you remember." Carlos ran a hand through his hair, visibly agitated. "There were two men. One stayed in the van while the other came in to buy gas. He seemed nervous, kept looking out the window." "Did you notice anything else?" Montero pressed. "Anything unusual?" Carlos frowned, concentrating. "Now that you mention it," he said slowly, "when the man was paying, I heard a noise coming from the van. Like a thump." Montero exchanged a meaningful look with his officers. "And what did you do?" "I asked him if everything was okay," Carlos replied. "He said it was his dog, that it was restless from the drive. But, now that I think about it, I didn't see a dog." Montero nodded gravely. "You've been very helpful, sir. Now we need to see that footage." In the back office, Montero and his team meticulously reviewed the security tapes. And there it was, the white van, just as it had been described. "Freeze it there," Montero ordered. The screen froze on a close-up of the van's license plate. "Bingo," Montero murmured. "We have our plate." He turned to one of his officers. I want you to contact traffic right now. I need to know where that van was headed. While the officer made the call, Montero continued to study the footage. Something about the men's demeanor bothered him. They seemed too calm. Chief, the officer on the phone called out, I have traffic on the line. The van was spotted on Highway 27, heading north, approximately an hour ago. Montero felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. They finally had a solid lead, but it also meant that the kidnappers had a considerable head start. All right, he said, his voice laced with determination. We know where they're headed. Time to move. As the team prepared to leave, Montero approached Carlos. Thank you for your help, he said. It's been crucial to our investigation. Carlos nodded, his face a mixture of concern and relief. I hope you find that little girl, son. I can't imagine what her parents are going through. Montero nodded grimly. We'll find her, he promised, whatever it takes. Back on the road, Montero drove with a focused intensity, his knuckles white against the steering wheel as his mind raced, replaying every detail of the case. What are you thinking, Chief? His partner, Officer Ramirez, asked from the passenger seat. Montero frowned. Something doesn't add up. These guys, they're not behaving like typical kidnappers. What do you mean? They're too methodical, Montero explained. The way they left that clue at the warehouse, the way they moved, it's almost as if they wanted us to follow them. Ramirez looked confused. But why would they do that? Montero shook his head. I don't know, but I have a feeling we're stepping into something much bigger than we thought. Meanwhile, at the Valdez house, Elena and Roberto waited anxiously for news. The silence in the house was oppressive, broken only by the steady ticking of the grandfather clock. Suddenly the phone rang, startling them both. Elena rushed to answer it. Hello? She said, her voice trembling. Detective Montero? But the voice on the other end of the line was not the detective's. Mrs. Valdez? A deep, unfamiliar voice said, We have your daughter. Elena felt the world stop spinning. Roberto, seeing her expression, hurried over, leaning in to listen to the call. Who are you? Elena managed to say. What do you want? Who we are isn't important, the voice replied. What we want? Well, that depends on you. Please, Elena begged, tears streaming down her face. Don't hurt our daughter. We'll do anything. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Your daughter is safe for now, but if you want her to stay that way, you will do exactly as we say. Understood? Elena and Roberto exchanged a look, fear and determination mingling in their eyes. Understood, Roberto answered, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. What do you want us to do? Very well, the voice said. Listen carefully. On your husband's desk, in his study, is a yellow envelope. Find it. Elena and Roberto raced to the study. Sure enough, there it was, a yellow envelope tucked between a pile of papers. We have it, Elena said, her heart pounding. Open it, the voice commanded. With trembling hands, Roberto tore open the envelope. Inside, there was a stack of documents and what appeared to be a flash drive. What is this? Roberto asked, confused. That, Mr. Valdez, the voice replied, is the reason why you have your daughter. Those documents contain very sensitive information. Information that many people would pay a lot of money to keep secret. Elena and Roberto stared at each other, stunned. What kind of information could be so valuable as to warrant the kidnapping of a child? I don't understand, Roberto said. We don't know anything about this. Why? Because you, Mr. and Mrs. Valdez, the voice interrupted, have access to something we need, something that only you can provide. And what is that? Elena asked, dreading the answer. In 24 hours, the voice continued, ignoring her question, you will receive further instructions on what to do with that information. If you follow those instructions to the letter, your daughter will return home safe and sound. If not, the threat hung heavy in the air. It didn't need to be spoken. Please, Elena begged, let us speak to Sophia. We need to know she's okay. There was a moment of silence and then, Mom? Dad? Sophia's small, frightened voice came through the phone. Sophia! Elena and Roberto shouted in unison. Are you all right? Have they hurt you? I'm okay, Sophia answered, her voice trembling slightly. Don't be afraid. Remember, Marie Curie never gave up. Before they could say anything else, the call cut off. Elena and Roberto stared at the phone, their minds reeling. What did those documents mean? And why had Sophia mentioned Marie Curie again? We have to call Detective Montero, Roberto said, finally breaking the silence. He needs to know about this. Elena nodded, but as she reached for the phone, she noticed something. A small piece of paper that had fallen out of the envelope when they opened it. Roberto picked it up and read the words scrawled on it. If you contact the police, the girl dies. Fear gripped them. What should they do? Meanwhile, on the highway, Detective Montero and his team continued their pursuit. The night was dark, and the road seemed to stretch on endlessly. Chief, Ramirez called out, I just received a report. They've spotted a van matching the description about 30 miles north of here. Montero nodded, his resolve firming. We're on the right track. Tell the rest of the team to get ready. When we get there, I want... His words were cut off by the ringing of his phone. It was from the station. Montero, he answered. Detective, the voice on the other end said, we have new information regarding the Valdez case. An anonymous tip just came in. It says the girl is being held at a cabin in the woods, about 60 miles east of your current location. Montero frowned, something not sitting right. An anonymous tip? Right now? I don't know, sir, the voice on the other end replied. The tip came in just a few minutes ago. It seemed very detailed. Montero felt his instincts screaming that something wasn't right. Send me the details, he said finally. But don't act on that information yet. I have a bad feeling about this. He hung up the phone and turned to Ramirez. Change of plans, he announced. We're splitting the team. You'll take half to investigate that van sighting. I'll take the rest and check out this new lead. Ramirez nodded, though he looked concerned. You sure about this, Chief? It could be a trap. I know, Montero replied, which is why I'm going. If it's a trap, I want to be the one to spring it. As the team reorganized, Montero couldn't shake the feeling that they were being manipulated. But by whom? And to what end? Meanwhile, back at the Valdez house, Roberto and Elena were locked in an agonizing debate. We have to tell the police, Roberto insisted, pacing the room nervously. Detective Montero can help us. Elena shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. What if they make good on their threat? She said, her voice cracking with fear. We can't risk Sophia's life. Roberto stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. But what other choice do we have? We don't know what to do with this information. We don't even know what it's about. Elena stared at the yellow envelope on the table as if it might reveal its secrets through sheer force of will. Maybe, she began hesitantly, maybe we should take a look. Perhaps there's something in there that can help us understand what's going on. Roberto looked at her, surprised. Are you sure? It could be dangerous. Elena slowly nodded. For Sophia, she said, I would do anything. With trembling hands, Roberto opened the envelope and began pulling out the documents. His eyes widened as he read. My God, he murmured. This is incredible. What is it? Elena asked, leaning closer to look. They're reports, Roberto explained, about secret experiments, something called Project Polonium. Elena gasped. Polonium, she repeated. Like the element Marie Curie discovered? Roberto nodded, his mind racing. And look at this, he said, pointing to a string of numbers at the bottom of a page. Looks like some kind of code. Elena frowned, studying the numbers. Wait a minute, she said suddenly. Those numbers, they look like the ones Sophia uses in her secret codes. Roberto stared at her, a spark of hope igniting in his eyes. You think Sophia could have seen these documents before? It's possible, Elena replied. She's always poking around your study, looking for new mysteries to solve. Roberto jumped to his feet. We need to crack this code. It could be the key to finding Sophia. As the Valdezes immersed themselves in the mysterious code, Detective Montero and his team were approaching the supposed cabin in the woods. Stay sharp, Montero warned his officers as they moved through the trees. We don't know what's waiting for us in there. The night was dark, and the forest was eerily quiet, only the crunching of leaves beneath their boots breaking the stillness. Suddenly, an officer pointed ahead. "There, Chief," he whispered. "I see a light." Sure enough, through the trees, they could make out the faint glow of a lit window. Montero signaled his team to fan out silently around the cabin. Heart pounding, he approached the front door. He counted to 3 silently, and then, with a powerful kick, he smashed it open. "Police!" he yelled. "Don't move!" But what he found inside stopped him cold. The cabin was empty, except for a chair placed in the center of the room. And in that chair, "It's a mannequin?" one of the officers said, incredulous. Montero slowly approached. The mannequin was dressed in children's clothing and had a wig that looked eerily similar to Sophia's hair. But what really caught his attention was the paper taped to its chest. With trembling hands, Montero peeled it off and read the message scrawled on it. "Nice try, detective. But the real game has just begun." Montero felt rage and frustration surge through him. They had walked right into a trap. "Damn it!" he roared, slamming his fist against the wall. One of the officers timidly approached. "Sir," he said, "we found something else." He handed Montero a small box that had been hidden under the chair. Inside there was a cell phone and a note that simply read, "Answer when it rings." Barely a few seconds later, the phone began to vibrate. Montero exchanged a tense look with his officers before answering. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice tight. A cold chuckle came from the other end. "Ah, Detective Montero. It's a pleasure to finally speak with you." "Where is Sophia?" Montero demanded. "Tsk, tsk," the voice replied. So impatient. "But don't worry. Little Sophia is safe and for now." "What do you want?" Montero asked, struggling to remain calm. "What we want, Detective," the voice said, "is to play a game of wits, if you will. And you've just passed the first test." Montero frowned. "What are you talking about? This isn't a game." "Oh, but it is, Detective," the voice replied, a mocking lilt to its tone. "And you're about to move on to the next level. Tell me, what do you know about Project Polonium?" Montero froze. How did they know they had just uncovered that information? "Enough to know that you're involved," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. The voice chuckled. "Very good, Detective. But do you know enough to find us? I'll give you a hint. The place you're looking for is closer than you think. It's right under your nose." The call cut off abruptly. Montero stared at the phone, his mind racing. Under their nose? "The underground lab," Ramirez said, understanding dawning. "You think Sophia's there?" "It's our best lead so far," Montero replied. "Gather the team. We leave in 5 minutes." As Montero and his team prepared for the raid, elsewhere in the city, Roberto and Elena Valdez were still frantically working to decipher the code they had found. "There has to be a connection," Elena said, rubbing her tired eyes. "Sophia mentioned Marie Curie for a reason." Roberto nodded, scanning the documents spread across his desk once more. "Wait a minute," he said suddenly, pointing to a string of numbers. "Aren't those the same numbers Sophia uses in her secret codes?" Elena leaned in for a closer look. "You're right," she exclaimed, "but they're in a different order." Roberto frowned, thinking. "What if," he murmured, picking up a pencil, "what if we rearrange them, based on the method Sophia showed us?" With trembling hands, he began to write, scrambling the numbers. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. "Elena, look!" Roberto shouted excitedly. "It's coordinates!" Elena gasped, recognizing the numbers. "Roberto, that's on the outskirts of town. You think we just found where they're holding Sophia?" Roberto finished, already rushing towards the door. "Come on, we have to call Detective Montero." Meanwhile, in the underground laboratory, Sophia sat in a corner of her cell, staring at the wall opposite her. She had been working on her own code, using a piece of chalk she had found to write on the wall. "Come on, Dad," she murmured to herself. "I know you can crack it." Suddenly, the cell door creaked open. Sophia instinctively flinched but forced herself to stay calm. A tall, thin man entered, his face obscured by shadows. Well, he said, his voice familiar. It was the leader. "Looks like our little genius has been busy." Sophia lifted her chin defiantly. "You're not going to get away with this," she said, her voice wavering only slightly. "Detective Montero will find you." The man chuckled, a cold sound that sent shivers down Sophia's spine. "Oh, we're counting on it," he replied. "In fact, Your dear detective is on his way right now." Sophia's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. The man leaned closer, his face now visible in the dim light. Sophia gasped in recognition. "I mean, my dear child," he said with a malevolent smile, "that the game is about to reach its grand finale." At that moment, on the surface, Detective Montero and his team were preparing to enter what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse. "Remember," Montero said to his officers, "we don't know what we're up against down there. Keep your eyes open and be ready for anything." Just as they were about to move, Montero's phone rang. It was Roberto Valdez. "Detective," Roberto said urgently, "we think we've cracked the code. We have coordinates for where they might be holding Sophia." Montero felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Mr. Valdez, we're at those coordinates right now," he replied. "We've found what appears to be an entrance to an underground laboratory." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Oh my God," Roberto murmured. "Please, detective, find our daughter." "I will," Montero promised. "Stay where you are. I'll let you know as soon as we have news." He hung up the phone and turned to his team. "It's time. Let's go in." With a synchronized movement, the SWAT team breached the warehouse door. Inside, they found what appeared to be a hidden elevator. "This is it," Montero murmured. "The underground laboratory." As they descended, the tension was palpable. No one knew what awaited them below. The elevator doors hissed open, revealing a long, sterile corridor. Fluorescent lights flickered ominously, casting unsettling shadows. "Stay sharp," Montero whispered as they moved forward. Suddenly, an alarm shrieked through the air, and emergency lights flashed, bathing everything in a crimson glow. "They know we're here," one of the officers yelled. "Keep moving," Montero ordered. "We have to find Sophia." They raced down the hallway, the sound of their footsteps drowned out by the blaring alarm. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a reinforced steel door. "Open it!" Montero shouted to the explosives expert. Within seconds, the door was blown to pieces. Montero was the first one through, his gun drawn. What he saw made him freeze. The room was enormous, filled with high-tech laboratory equipment, and in the center, surrounded by armed men, stood Sophia. "Detective Montero!" the girl cried out, her voice a mixture of relief and terror. "Hold it right there!" a familiar voice boomed. Montero spun around and came face to face with the man he had been searching for, the leader of this entire operation. "Welcome, detective," the man said with a chilling smile. "We've been expecting you." Montero aimed his gun directly at the man's chest. "It's over," he growled. "Let the girl go and surrender." The man laughed, a sound that made the hairs on the back of Montero's neck stand on end. "Oh, detective," he said, "this is far from over. In fact, it's just beginning." With a wave of his hand, an entire wall of the room lit up, revealing a bank of monitors. On them, Montero saw images of the city, of people in their homes, of children in schools. "Do you see this, detective?" the man asked. "This is the real Project Polonium, a surveillance system so advanced it makes 1984 look like child's play." Montero felt a sick feeling in his stomach. "Why?" he managed to ask. "Why do all of this?" The man smiled, an expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Power, detective. The kind of power that comes with knowing every move, every secret, every weakness of an entire city." Sophia, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke. "But you made one mistake," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "You underestimated the people you were spying on." The leader turned to her, one eyebrow raised. "Oh?" he asked, amused. "And how's that, little genius?" Sophia smiled, an expression that reminded Montero of a cat that had just cornered a mouse. "Because while you were busy watching everyone else," she said, "I was busy cracking your codes and sending a message." At that moment, the sound of helicopters filled the air. Brilliant lights illuminated the room through skylights in the ceiling. "What the hell?" the leader snarled. Montero used the distraction to his advantage. In a flash, he had the leader on the ground, handcuffed. "Like I said," he growled, "it's over." While the SWAT team dealt with the remaining armed men, Montero rushed over to Sophia. "Are you all right?" he asked, quickly checking her for injuries. Tears of relief streamed down Sophia's face. "I knew you'd find me," she said. "I left as many clues as I could." Montero smiled, feeling a surge of pride for the girl's bravery. "You did great, Sophia. Your parents will be so proud." As they made their way out of the underground laboratory, Montero couldn't help but think about how close they had come to losing everything. But thanks to the cleverness of a little girl and the determination of a team, they had managed to expose a conspiracy that could have changed the course of history. Outside, the sun was beginning to peek over the horizon, signaling the start of a new day. Montero looked at Sophia, who blinked in the dawn light. "Come on," he said softly. "It's time to take you home." As they walked away from the scene, Montero knew this case would haunt him for a long time to come. The questions about who was truly behind Project Polonium, how far its tendrils reached, and what other surprises might be waiting, remained unanswered. But for now, he was content with the victory they had achieved. A child was safe, a family would be reunited, and a dangerous plot had been thwarted. As they climbed into the police car, Sophia looked at Montero with curious eyes. "Detective," she asked, "do you think we'll ever know the whole truth about this?" Montero looked at her, seeing not just the little girl who had been kidnapped, but the brilliant young woman she would become. "I don't know, Sophia," he answered honestly. "But if anyone can figure it out one day, it's you." Sophia smiled, and for a moment, Montero saw a glimpse of the future. A future where dark secrets would be brought to light, and where the truth, however difficult it might be to find, would always prevail. "Maybe I will," Sophia said, her voice filled with determination. After all, Marie Curie never gave up in her pursuit of the truth, and neither will I. With those words, the car pulled away, taking them back to the city, leaving behind a rising sun that illuminated the dusty rural road. The ride back to the city was mostly quiet, with Sophia occasionally looking out the window and Montero lost in his thoughts. Finally, she broke the silence. "Detective Montero," she said quietly, "do you think my parents will be mad at me?" Montero looked at her, surprised. "Mad? Why would you think that, Sophia?" Sophia looked down, nervously playing with the hem of her shirt. "Because I snooped in Dad's study. If I hadn't seen those documents, none of this would have happened." Montero felt his heart clench. He pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face Sophia directly. "Listen to me carefully, Sophia," he said, his voice firm but kind. "None of this is your fault. The only people to blame are the ones who decided to hurt others. You were incredibly brave and smart. Thanks to you, we were able to stop something very dangerous." Sophia looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You really think so?" "Absolutely," Montero nodded. "And I'm sure your parents will be incredibly proud of you." "I know I am." A small smile touched Sophia's lips. "Thank you, Detective," she whispered. Montero smiled back and put the car back in gear. The rest of the drive was more comfortable, punctuated by Sophia's occasional, curious questions about police work. When they finally arrived at the Valdez house, they saw Elena and Roberto standing on the porch, their arms wrapped around each other, anxiety etched on their faces. At the sight of the police car, they rushed to the curb. Sophia barely had time to get out of the car before she was enveloped in a desperate hug by her parents. "Sophia! Oh my God, Sophia!" Elena sobbed, covering her daughter's face with kisses. "My little girl. My brave little girl," Roberto murmured, his eyes filled with tears. Montero watched the scene with a mixture of relief and emotion. These were the moments that made his job worthwhile. After several minutes of hugs and tears, the Valdez family finally separated. Elena and Roberto turned to Montero. "Detective," Roberto said, extending his hand, "we can't thank you enough for what you've done." Montero shook his hand firmly. "There's nothing to thank, Mr. Valdez. Your daughter is the real hero here." Sophia blushed at the compliment, but then her expression turned serious. "Mom, Dad," she said, "there's something we need to talk about Project Polonium." Elena and Roberto exchanged a worried glance. "Maybe we should go inside," Elena suggested. "Detective Montero, please join us." Once inside, they all sat down in the living room. Sophia took a deep breath and began to recount everything she had learned. Montero watched as the expressions on the Valdez's faces shifted from surprise to horror, and finally, to steely determination. "I can't believe something like that was going on, right under our noses," Roberto said when Sophia had finished. "The question is, what do we do now?" Elena asked, looking at Montero. The detective leaned forward, his expression grave. "What we have here is much bigger than we initially thought. Project Polonium has implications that probably extend far beyond our city. We're going to need help at the federal level to unravel all of this." "And what about us?" Sophia asked, a hint of fear in her voice. Montero gave her a reassuring smile. "You'll be under 24-hour police protection until we're sure there's no more danger," he explained, "and we may need your help to decipher more of the information we've recovered." Sophia felt a thrill of excitement at the prospect of more puzzles to solve. "Detective," Roberto said, "those documents we found in my study, how did they get there?" Montero frowned thoughtfully. "That's an excellent question, Mr. Valdez, and one we need to answer. Do you have any idea who might have had access to your study?" Roberto and Elena exchanged a worried look. "We've had some workmen in the house recently," Elena said slowly, "for some repairs." "We'll need a list of all of them," Montero said, pulling out his notepad. "And anyone else who's been in the house in the past few weeks?" As the Valdezes began to compile names, Montero noticed that Sophia was unusually quiet. "You okay, Sophia?" he asked softly. The girl looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "Detective," she whispered, "there's something else I haven't told you. Something I saw in that lab." Montero felt his heart skip a beat. "What is it, Sophia?" The girl glanced around to make sure her parents weren't listening. "I saw a map," she said in a low voice. "A map of the city, with marks on several locations. And one of those locations," she paused, swallowing hard, "it was my school." Montero felt a chill run down his spine. If Project Polonium was targeting schools— "Thank you for telling me, Sophia," he said, forcing himself to remain calm. "We'll be sure to investigate this thoroughly." At that moment, Montero's phone rang. It was Ramirez. "Chief," his partner's voice said, strained. "We have a problem. Some of the suspects we apprehended, they've disappeared from police custody." Montero's blood ran cold. "How is that possible?" "We don't know, sir," Ramirez replied. "But there's more. We found something in their belongings. It appears to be a contingency plan." Montero looked at the Valdez family, who were watching him with worried expressions. "I'm on my way," he said grimly. "And Ramirez, increase security at every school in the city, now." He hung up the phone and turned to the Valdezes. "I have to go," he said, "but there will be officers stationed outside to protect you. Don't leave the house until I tell you it's safe. Understood?" Everyone nodded. The gravity of the situation reflected on their faces. As Montero headed for the door, he felt a tug on his jacket. It was Sophia. "Detective," the girl said, her voice filled with determination, "promise me you'll stop them, that we won't let them win." Montero knelt down to her level. "I promise you, Sophia," he said firmly. "No matter what, we won't let them get away with this." With a final glance at the Valdez family, Montero left the house and headed for his car. As he drove back to the station, his mind was in overdrive. The case he thought he had solved had just become much more complicated, and he had a feeling the worst was yet to come. The sun was already high in the sky, but for Detective Montero and the Valdez family, the darkness of the previous night had not fully lifted. The real battle was just beginning, and the fate of an entire city might hinge on the decisions they made in the next few hours. As Montero drove away, Sophia stood at the window, watching the car disappear into the distance, her small fists clenched in determination. She may have only been a little girl, but she had cracked the code once, and she was determined to do it again, no matter what the cost. The adventure that had started on her way to school was far from over. In fact, as Sophia and Detective Montero would soon discover, this was only the beginning of something much bigger and more dangerous than either of them could have imagined. Detective Montero stormed into the police station, his face a mask of determination. Officers moved out of his way, sensing the urgency in his stride. "Ramirez!" he barked. "Report, now!" His partner hurried over, clutching a file. "Chief, the situation is critical," Ramirez began. "3 of the main suspects have vanished, and that contingency plan we found, it's worse than we thought." Montero's brow furrowed. "How bad?" Ramirez opened the file, revealing a series of documents and maps. "It seems Project Polonium wasn't just a surveillance system," he explained. "It was the first phase of something much bigger, something called Operation Curie." "Operation Curie?" Montero repeated. "What the hell is that?" "According to these documents," Ramirez continued, "it's a plan to restructure society, starting with the schools." Montero felt a chill run down his spine. Sophia's words echoed in his mind. "I saw a map of the city with marks on several locations, and one of those locations, it was my school." "My God," he murmured. "How much time do we have?" Ramirez glanced at his watch. "Based on the timeline we found, the operation is scheduled to commence in 3 hours. Montero slammed his fist on the table. "Damn it, we're out of time. I want every available officer on high alert. Contact the FBI, the National Guard, whoever we need. We have to stop this." As the station buzzed with activity, Montero's phone rang. It was Elena Valdez. "Detective," her voice trembled. "Something's happening. Sophia, she cracked something else." Montero tensed. "What did she find?" "It's best if you come here," Elena replied. Without a second thought, Montero raced to his car. On the way to the Valdez house, his mind was racing. What else could Sophia have uncovered? He arrived to find the family gathered in the living room. Sophia was sitting on the floor, surrounded by papers covered in numbers and symbols. "Detective," the girl said, looking up at him. "I think I know where they're going to strike first." Montero knelt down beside her. "Tell me everything, Sophia." Sophia took a deep breath. "I was thinking about the code they used," she explained, "and I realized they weren't just hiding information, they were leaving a message." She pointed to a series of symbols on one of the papers. "Look," she said, "if you rearrange these symbols, based on the decay pattern of polonium." Montero watched, amazed, as Sophia manipulated the symbols, revealing a hidden pattern. "It's a sequence," he murmured, "a sequence of attacks." Sophia nodded. "And the first target," she said, pointing to a spot on a map of the city, "is City Hall." Montero leaped to his feet. "We have to evacuate the building, now." As Montero made frantic calls, organizing the evacuation and deploying police units, Sophia continued to work on the code. "Detective," she called out after a few minutes, "there's something else. I think I know who's behind all of this." Montero turned to her, his heart pounding. "Who, Sophia?" The girl looked up at him, her eyes filled with fear and determination. "It's the mayor," she said quietly. "The mayor is part of Operation Curie." A stunned silence filled the room. Montero felt the ground shift beneath his feet. If the mayor was involved, this was much bigger than they had imagined. "Sophia," he said finally, "are you sure?" The girl nodded. "The final code, it leads directly to his private office at City Hall." Montero glanced at his watch. They had less than an hour. "All right," he said, his voice laced with determination. "Here's what we're going to do." In the next few minutes, Montero laid out a daring plan. With Sophia's help and the input of her parents, they assembled an elite team to infiltrate City Hall. "It's dangerous," Montero warned, "but it's our only chance to stop Operation Curie before it's too late." After her father left, Sophia finished breakfast and got ready to leave. "Don't forget your lunch," her mother reminded her, handing her a paper bag. "And be careful on your way." "I will, Mom. I always am," Sophia replied, hugging her mother. "Love you. See you after school." Sophia skipped out the front door, unaware that this day would change her life forever. The walk to school was a familiar one. She turned right at the end of her street, walked past the park, and then 3 more blocks to San Chain Elementary School. Usually she met her best friend, Lucia, at the park, but today Lucia was homesick. As she walked, Sophia mentally reviewed her presentation. She was so engrossed in her thoughts that she didn't notice the white van slowly creeping alongside her. "Excuse me, can you help me?" a voice called out from the van. Sophia stopped and looked. The driver was a middle-aged man wearing sunglasses. "I'm looking for Oak Street," the man continued. "Do you know where it is?" Something in the man's voice made Sophia feel uneasy. She remembered her parents' warnings about talking to strangers. "I'm sorry, I'm not from around here," she lied, taking a step back. "You should ask someone else." The man's face changed, a disturbing smile spreading across his lips. "Come on, little girl," he said, his voice losing all pretense of friendliness. "I know you know the area. Just get in and show me." Sophia's heart began to pound. She knew she was in danger. "No!" she yelled, spinning around to run. But before she could take more than a few steps, she felt a strong hand grab her from behind. A second man had emerged from the back of the van without her noticing. "Help!" Sophia screamed, struggling against the man's grip. "Somebody, help me!" But the park was deserted at this time of the morning. No one came to her rescue. "Shut up, brat!" the man growled, clamping a hand over her mouth as he dragged her toward the van. Sophia kicked and twisted, trying desperately to break free. In the struggle, her backpack fell to the ground, scattering her books and papers across the sidewalk. As the man shoved her into the van, Sophia caught sight of her open science notebook lying on the ground. In a moment of clarity amidst the panic, an idea struck her. She bit down hard on the man's hand covering her mouth. "Damn it!" he roared, momentarily loosening his grip. Sophia seized the opportunity and shouted, "Marie Curie! Polonium and radium." Then the van door slammed shut, the engine roared to life, and the vehicle sped away, leaving Sophia's backpack and her desperate cry behind. Back at the Valdez house, Sophia's mother, Elena, was growing worried. Hours had passed since Sophia was supposed to have arrived at school, and she had not received a call. "Calm down, Elena," she told herself. She probably just forgot to call when she got there. But a knot of dread twisted in her stomach. Something felt wrong. Elena decided to call the school. "Good morning, Sanchain Elementary." A cheerful voice answered. "Good morning, this is Elena Valdez, Sophia Valdez's mother, 6th grade, Elena said, trying to remain calm. "I was wondering if Sophia had arrived at school this morning." There was a pause. "One moment, please." The seconds that Elena waited felt like hours. Finally, the secretary returned. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Valdez," she said, her voice now laced with concern, "but Sophia hasn't shown up for class today." Elena's world crumbled. Her worst nightmare was coming true. "Thank you," she managed to say before hanging up. With trembling hands, she dialed her husband's number. "Elena," Roberto answered. "I'm in the middle of a meeting." "Roberto," Elena interrupted, her voice breaking. "Sophia didn't arrive at school." A stunned silence. Then, "I'm on my way. Call the police, Elena. Now." As Elena called the police, Roberto frantically drove home, his mind filled with terrifying possibilities. Within an hour, the Valdez house had become the center of a police investigation. Officers moved in and out, taking statements and searching for clues. In the midst of the chaos, a tall, serious-looking man approached Elena and Roberto. "Mr. and Mrs. Valdez," he said, displaying his badge. "I'm Detective Javier Montero. I'm in charge of the investigation into your daughter's disappearance." Elena, her eyes red and swollen from crying, looked at the detective with desperate hope. "Please, detective, find our little girl?" Detective Montero nodded solemnly. "We'll do everything we can, Mrs. Valdez. Now I need you to tell me everything you can about this morning. Did you notice anything unusual? Anyone suspicious lurking around the neighborhood?" Roberto shook his head. "Everything seemed normal. Sophia had breakfast. We chatted about her presentation today." "Presentation?" the detective interrupted. "Yes, about Marie Curie," Elena explained. Sophia was very excited about it. Detective Montero made a note. "And the route to school? Did she walk alone?" "She usually walks with her friend, Lucia," Elena answered, "but Lucia is sick today." The detective frowned. "We'll need to check that route," he said. As the parents described Sophia's usual walk to school, an officer rushed into the room. "Detective Montero," he said breathlessly, "we found something at the park." Elena's heart lurched. "What is it?" she asked, fearing the answer. The officer glanced at the parents with sympathy. "The girl's backpack, sir. And there are signs of a struggle." Roberto embraced Elena, who had begun to sob uncontrollably. I'm going to go see for myself, Detective Montero said. You two stay here. I'll let you know if there are any developments. As the detective headed to the park, news of Sophia's disappearance began to spread throughout the neighborhood. Concerned neighbors gathered in front of the Valdez house, offering their help and condolences. At the park, Detective Montero surveyed the scene. Sophia's backpack lay open on the ground, its contents scattered across the sidewalk. Books, pencils, and notebooks were strewn about like silent witnesses to the struggle that had taken place. Any prints? Montero asked one of the forensic technicians. We're working on it, sir, the technician replied, but we did find something strange on one of the notebooks. The detective stepped closer. The technician pointed to an open science notebook on the ground. Look at this, he said, indicating a page. It looks like someone scribbled something down in a hurry. Montero crouched down to examine the notebook. In the corner of a page, written in shaky handwriting, was a message. Marie cry plo ard. What the hell does this mean? He muttered. I don't know, sir, the technician replied, but it doesn't look like the girl's usual handwriting. The rest of the notebook is written very neatly. Detective Montero sensed he was onto something significant, even though he couldn't decipher its meaning yet. Get all of this to the lab, he ordered. I want every inch of these items analyzed, and I need those results ASAP. As the forensic team collected the evidence, Montero noticed tire tracks on the pavement, as if a vehicle had sped away. Get casts of those tracks, he instructed another technician, and check all the security cameras within a 3-mile radius. Look for any suspicious vehicles, especially vans or trucks. Back at the Valdez house, Detective Montero prepared himself to break the news to Sophia's parents. He knew what he had to say would shatter their hearts, but it would also give them a glimmer of hope. Mr. and Mrs. Valdez, he began, his voice deep but compassionate, we found evidence at the park suggesting that Sophia was taken against her will. Elena gasped, burying her face in Roberto's chest. Sophia's father, meanwhile, clenched his fists, his face a mask of anguish and controlled fury. But Montero continued quickly. We've also found something that may be a clue left by Sophia. We believe she managed to write a message in her notebook before she was taken. Roberto's head snapped up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. A message? He asked hoarsely. What does it say? The detective pulled out his notepad. It's just a few letters. Miri cry plo ard. Does this mean anything to you? Elena and Roberto exchanged confused looks, shaking their heads. I don't understand, Elena said between sobs. What does it mean? We don't know yet, Montero admitted, but we're working on it. Can you think of anything Sophia might have wanted to communicate? Some code she used, maybe? Roberto frowned, thinking. Sophia's always been very clever, he said slowly. She loves riddles and codes, but this doesn't look like anything we've ever seen before. Detective Montero nodded, jotting down the information in his notepad. You mentioned that Sophia had a presentation today, he asked, about Marie Curie? Elena nodded, wiping away her tears. Yes, she was very excited about it. She's been studying Marie Curie all week. The detective paused, an idea forming in his mind. Marie Curie, he murmured. Could it be? He turned to the parents. Is it possible that Marie Curie is shorthand for Marie Curie? Roberto's eyes widened. Of course. Sophia's always been fond of abbreviations. But what about plo ard? Polonium and radium, Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. The elements Marie Curie discovered. Detective Montero felt a jolt of adrenaline. They were onto something. He could feel it. This could be crucial, he said, his voice charged with urgency. Sophia didn't just leave a message. She coded it in a way she knew you would understand. She's a very smart girl. Elena choked out a sob that turned into a shaky laugh. She always has been our little genius. Detective Montero stood up, his resolve renewed. I'm putting my entire team on this. If Sophia left any more clues, we will find them. Just then, the detective's phone rang. He answered briskly. Montero, he said, listening for a moment, his expression shifting from surprise to determination. Understood. I'm on my way. He hung up and turned to the Valdezes, who looked at him expectantly. They found security camera footage, he explained. It shows a white van speeding away from the park this morning, right around the time Sophia disappeared. Elena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Do they have them? Roberto asked, his voice strained. Do they have the license plate? The detective shook his head. The image isn't clear, but it's a start. I'm going to the station to review the footage myself. I promise I will keep you updated. As the detective made for the door, Elena stopped him. Detective Montero, she said, her voice cracking, please, find our daughter. She's all we have. Montero looked into her eyes, seeing the pain and hope mingled within them. I will do everything in my power, Mrs. Valdez. I won't rest until Sophia is home safe. With those words, the detective left the house and headed for his car. As he drove toward the station, his mind raced. Sophia's coded message, the white van, the route to school, they were all pieces of a puzzle he had to solve, and fast. At the police station, the atmosphere was frantic. Officers rushed back and forth, phones rang incessantly, and at the heart of it all was the investigation room, where a group of detectives and analysts worked tirelessly on Sophia's case. Montero! A voice called out as the detective entered the room. Over here! It was Ana Soto, one of the department's best video analysts. She was seated in front of a large monitor, the image frozen on a blurry white van. What do we have, Soto? Montero asked, joining her at the screen. Ana typed rapidly on her keyboard, and the image on the monitor changed, showing a sequence of the van in motion. It's the best I could get from the recording, she explained. The quality isn't the best, but, she paused dramatically, I managed to capture this. She pressed another key, and the image zoomed in, focusing on the back of the van. There, barely visible, was a small sticker. What is that? Montero asked, squinting. It appears to be the logo for a moving company, Ana replied. Rapid Movers. It's not much, but it's a start. Good work, Soto. I need you to find every moving company with that name in the city and surrounding areas. Ana nodded and set to work. Meanwhile, Montero made his way to another desk, where a young officer worked furiously at a computer. Any news on that coded message, Ramirez? He asked. Officer Ramirez looked up, his eyes tired but determined. We're working on it, Chief. We've confirmed that Emery Cry refers to Marie Curie and Plo-RD to polonium and radium. But there's something else. Montero leaned closer, intrigued. What is it? Ramirez swiveled his monitor so that Montero could see. We've been researching Marie Curie and her discoveries, he explained. And we found something interesting. She named polonium after Poland, her native country. Montero frowned, processing the information. You think that could be relevant? Ramirez nodded emphatically. It could be. If Sophia was trying to tell us something more than just the names of the elements, she might be pointing us towards a location. Montero's mind raced. Is there a Poland Street in the city? Or anything related? Ramirez typed quickly on his computer. Let me see, he murmured, scanning the screen. There's no Poland Street, but... He stopped, his eyes widening. There's a Poland Park on the other side of town. Montero felt his heart quicken. They were close. He could feel it. Good work, Ramirez, he said, clapping the officer on the shoulder. I want a team ready to go to that park in 5 minutes. As Montero headed for the door, Ana Soto called out to him. Detective? Montero stopped short, turning back to her. What is it? Rapid Movers, Ana said, reading from her screen. They have a warehouse near Poland Park. Detective Montero felt all the pieces click into place. Sophia hadn't just left a message, she had given them a location. Call for backup, he ordered, his voice urgent. We're going to that warehouse, now. As the team prepared to leave, Montero couldn't help but feel a mixture of admiration and concern for Sophia. The girl had been incredibly brave and clever to leave those clues. He just hoped it wasn't too late to save her. Heart pounding, Montero climbed into his patrol car. The race against time was on, and he was determined to win it. Sophia was leading them, and he would not let her down. As the convoy of police vehicles sped towards Poland Park, Montero couldn't stop thinking about Sophia's parents, anxiously awaiting news at home. He had promised them he would find their daughter, and he was determined to keep that promise, no matter the cost. The sun began to set on the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. But for Detective Montero and his team, the night was just beginning. And somewhere in the city, a brave little girl waited to be rescued, trusting that the clues she had left would be enough to guide those who were searching for her. The tension in the air was palpable as the vehicles neared their destination. Montero gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind replaying the details of the case. Every second counted, and he knew it more than anyone. With one last glance at the rapidly darkening sky, he pressed down on the accelerator. The race against time continued, and Sophia's fate hung precariously in the balance. The convoy of police vehicles pulled to a stop a block away from the Rapid Movers warehouse. Detective Montero stepped out of his car, adjusting his bulletproof vest. "Listen up, everyone," he said in a low, firm voice to his assembled team. "We don't know what we're walking into here. We proceed with caution. The girl's safety is our top priority. Understood?" The officers nodded silently, their faces grim but determined. "Good," Montero continued. "Alpha team with me, front entrance. Bravo team, you cover the rear, on my signal." As they stealthily approached the warehouse, Montero couldn't help but think about Sophia. "Hold on, little one," he thought. "We're coming." Suddenly, a metallic clang rang out in the night air. Everyone froze. "What was that?" one of the officers whispered. Montero held up a hand, signaling silence. He strained to listen, and then he heard it. The unmistakable sound of an engine starting. "They're moving!" he shouted. "Go, go, go!" The team charged towards the warehouse, abandoning all caution. Montero kicked in the front door, which burst open with a crash. "Police!" he roared. "It's dangerous," Montero admitted, "but it's our best chance to stop this once and for all." Roberto and Elena exchanged a determined look. "We're with you," Roberto said. "Until the end." As they prepared to leave, Sophia approached Montero. "Detective," she said, "I want to go with you." Montero knelt in front of her. "Sophia, it's too dangerous," he began, but the girl cut him off. "I'm the only one who can decipher the codes. And if we find more," she insisted, "you need me there." Montero glanced at Sophia's parents, who reluctantly nodded. "All right," he relented, "but you'll stay in the command vehicle. Understood?" Sophia felt a small surge of triumph. The drive to City Hall was tense. The streets were almost deserted, with police diverting traffic and evacuating nearby buildings. Upon arrival, Montero led his team towards a side entrance, while Sophia stayed in the command vehicle, guiding them through their communicators. "The mayor's office is on the top floor," Sophia's voice whispered in their ears. "Be careful. There are guards at every corner." Evading security, they finally reached the door to the mayor's office. Montero gave a signal, and with a synchronized movement, they crashed through the door. What they found inside made their blood run cold. The mayor stood by the window, surrounded by screens and sophisticated equipment. Beside him stood the three suspects who had escaped police custody. "Detective Montero," the mayor said, his voice cold and calculating. "We've been expecting you." Montero leveled his weapon. "It's over," he growled. "You're surrounded." The mayor smiled, a chilling, empty expression. "Oh no, detective," he replied. "This is just the beginning." With a wave of his hand, the screen sprang to life, displaying images from all over the city. "You see this, detective?" the mayor asked. "In a few minutes, every electronic device in this city will be under our control. Operation Curie will transform our society, whether they like it or not." Montero stepped forward. "Why?" he demanded. "Why do all of this?" The mayor looked at him, his eyes gleaming with a disturbing fanaticism. "For the greater good, detective. Sometimes to cure a disease, you have to burn away the infected tissue. Our society is sick, and we are the cure." Suddenly, Sophia's voice crackled through Montero's communicator. "Detective," she whispered urgently, "I found a way to stop the system, but I need direct access to the main computer." Montero glanced around. The computer was on the other side of the room, guarded by armed men. "It's too risky," he murmured. "It's our only chance," Sophia insisted. Montero made a split-second decision. "Now!" he shouted. In an instant, the room erupted into chaos. Montero and his team charged at the guards, while Roberto and Elena, who had arrived with the police, raced towards the computer. Amidst the gunfire and confusion, Sophia guided her parents through the communicator. "Plug the device I gave you into the main port," she instructed. "Quickly, We only have a few seconds. With trembling hands, Roberto inserted the device. The screens flickered, and then suddenly, the entire system shut down. No! The mayor screamed, rushing towards the computer, but it was too late. The virus Sophia had created had spread throughout the system, dismantling it from the inside out. Within minutes, it was over. The mayor and his accomplices were handcuffed and led away. Montero walked to the window, looking out at the city they had just saved. Sophia and her parents entered the office, the girl rushing towards the detective. "We did it!" Sophia exclaimed, her voice filled with wonder and relief. Montero swept her up in his arms, a tired but genuine smile on his face. "Yes, little one," he replied. "We did it, thanks to you." As the sun set over the city, bathing everything in a golden glow, Montero knew that this was only the beginning. There would be questions to answer, systems to rebuild, trust to restore. But looking at Sophia, he felt a surge of hope. A new generation, unwilling to settle for the shadows, would seek the truth, no matter the cost. "What happens now?" Sophia asked, looking out at the city below. Montero smiled. "Now, Sophia," he replied, "we write a new chapter, one where truth and justice prevail." As the Valdez family and Detective Montero walked out of City Hall, towards a future that was uncertain but full of possibilities, they knew one thing for sure. Together, they could face whatever challenges the world threw at them. The mystery of the kidnapping had been solved, but the real adventure was just beginning.